As we continue to celebrate the 4th year anniversary of the Dr. 𝐼𝐻𝐾 led government, I am joined by Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water, Honorable Susan Rodrigues, as we have a group discussion on housing in Guyana, the transformation that we have seen unfolding across the country. And of course, I have some participants who had burning questions or a desire to engage Minister Rodrigues. So we are facilitating this conversation as part of the 4th year anniversary commemoration. Thank you for taking time out, Minister, to be here.
Sure, it's my pleasure to be here.
All right. I know we sometimes don't want to talk about it, but it is necessary given the context of the amount of transformation that we've seen unfolding in just 4 years under the PPPC administration. Let's go back all the way to 2020, when you were sworn in as part of Dr. 𝐼𝐻𝐾's government. What was inherited, or what was the state of the housing sector at that time?
Thank you, Travis, for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be able to join you and the participants in this focus group discussion. I think a lot of pertinent information will come out here today. First of all, let me say that I'm very privileged to be serving as a minister in President 𝐼𝐻𝐾's government. I think this is the most important time in the history of our country, and this will be his governance and his leadership during this time will be the most significant and most impactful. So I'm honored to be serving at this time. When we took office in 2020, and we did speak about this very early on when we assumed government, because it was important for us to put into context what we found in both the housing and water sector, for which I share responsibility. But today I know we're focusing mostly on the housing sector. And so a lot of people know the story already. There was a lack of a housing policy and a housing program during the 2015 to 2020 period. There was no Ministry of Housing. It was relegated to a department within the Ministry of Communities, as it then was, under the APNU-AFC coalition government. For 3 years, there was no capital budget for the Central Housing and Planning Authority, and that tells a story that tells the country and signals to the country that housing was not in their top priority of things to do when they were in office. And we all know food, shelter, clean water, access to jobs or employment, those are the fundamental things. Access to affordable health care, access to free education, that should be the government's top priority in terms of spending. And we didn't see that in the housing sector. That's why for 5 years, they only distributed about 7,000 house lots. We were able to surpass that in our first year in office, our first year, and they took 5 years to do that. There was no investment in developing new housing schemes, and that is a result of the lack of policy. So there was no policy direction, there was no investment, no substantial investment in the sector. You had a series of housing ministers. I think you had about 3 different housing ministers in that period of 5 years. And so that resulted in a lot of people losing hope in the housing sector. That's why when we took office and we found a backlog of 70,000 applicants, we understood that this was the result of lack of investment and no strategic direction for the Ministry of Housing during that time, or for the housing sector during that time. So it was a very sad state of affairs, and we had to pick up the pieces. We had over 2,000 people who were allocated in the year 2020 before the official swearing in of President Ali in August. We had from January to August, when they were still a caretaker government, they allocated over 2,000 people during that period. and in areas where there was no infrastructure. And so when we took office and we started the investment in the infrastructure in housing areas, those 2,000 people that they allocated were the first beneficiaries of access to their house lots. We honored all of those allocations. We didn't punish ordinary Guyanese. We didn't come into government with vengeance or with a vindictive agenda. We honored all of the allocations that they made. We ensured that we invested in the infrastructure, and those people are happy homeowners today under President Irfaan Ali's government. So it's important that we examine that, and that will help in the appreciation of how far we have come from that time when we took office in August of 2020.
So one of the things I want us to touch on now is actually Silica City. The time that I heard about Silica City, I thought it was so visionary in a sense. It was even, I feel as though it's even beyond our time now, but the time to act is actually now. So Silica City is now being developed as we speak, and building a new city from scratch is really big work. It's tough work, but it's happening. What have we learned from the current layout of our town right now here in Georgetown, and how will it be done differently for Silica City?
So Silica City will be a masterpiece. It will be something that all Guyanese at home and abroad can be proud of. Silica City was actually launched, I believe it was in 2013, when President Ali launched Silica City. So that's how long ago he had this idea and this concept to build a smart, green, modern city. Because we all know, and we grow up knowing that Guyana is below sea level. We know that we have to protect our coastal areas from flooding. We know that we have the threat of climate change. And since then, he had this idea and this vision to build a city outside of the city. And in 2013, building smart cities was not even a popular concept then, so he was ahead of his time. And, well, you know what happened in 2015, and his party came out of government, our party came out of government, so we were not able to follow up on that. But he never lost that dream, never lost that hope. And when we came back into government, he revived that idea and said, we have to build Silica City. We have to make it a reality. And so he quickly assembled a team of experts. We've had many people come into the country over the last 4 years, make presentations to us about other cities that they've built in other parts of the world. But we had to make the right choice. And so we went with the University of Miami, who helped us to develop the master plan for Silica City, inclusive of the innovation village that will be housed or be a part of Silica City, which will be a hub for research and development in all the sectors. So they're experienced planners, and they have carefully designed the master plan for Silica, and it will be a thriving new modern city. And people are no longer having this fear that it's too far away, because they understand that very thoughtful, careful planning have gone into this. Of course, with any new city, you have to build houses for people. You have to ensure that if you want a workforce there, you have to be able to house them. And so we have gone ahead and started the construction of 100 homes at Silica City. So this is where the workforce will be. This is where the people who are going to eventually build and work in this city, they have to first live there to be part of that process. So it's going to be exciting. I know in another 10 years I may no longer be Minister of Housing, but I know that I'll still have that feeling of pride when I can drive around and drive to Silica City and see what we were able to create with a vision from the president and with all the support that he has given to the housing sector in terms of allocation of resources, guidance, in ensuring that we implement our housing policy, which we came into government knowing, so we didn't have to come into government and then figure out what we were doing. We made specific commitments in the housing sector, like delivering 50,000 house lots in the 5 years, which we are in the process of doing, and taking on other initiatives. We didn't promise to build Silica City, but it's one of those additional things that we know that it's a necessity. We know that we have to start thinking bigger and start thinking outside of Georgetown and creating employment in other places. That's why you see massive investments in other regions, in Region 2, in Region 3, in Region 6, where we are building stadiums and hospitals and creating employment opportunity and creating excitement in those regions so that we can get support from the private sector to create further employment in those areas. So everybody doesn't have to think Region 4 or Georgetown when they want to think about where the city is. We want to create townships and cities in all of these regions so that people can want to live and work and stay in these areas.
Minister Rodrigues, you touched on a very, very valid point there. It was actually going to be my lead on to the next question, because I know years ago, persons in Georgetown didn't even want to travel up the East Bank. They felt it was too far away. Mm-hmm. So with Silica City shaping up now, and we can talk about the road networks that are being built out, I mean, the new Demerara Harbor Bridge, as well as a possible connectivity tool to link these cities, to link these communities, and to foster a sense of togetherness or wholeness of the country. Are we seeing more interest being expressed by persons for, let's say, the Suzdijk area for residential purposes?
So definitely more interest in those areas going further out, but also I would say less resistance to being placed in areas outside of Georgetown. And I'll give you an example because I witnessed this myself. I went with a group of people who were taken on their lot identification exercise to Grove. And these were people who, when they received their allocation in one of the blocks in Grove, Diamond, were very hesitant. They said, that's too far. You know, I work in Georgetown, or I'm a nurse at GPHC, or I teach at a school in Georgetown, and it's too far for me to go. And this one young lady was showing her house lot. So she was driven in there by one of our staff, and she was taken to the lot. And I was present there when she saw and she marked her name on the lot and so on. And I said, "Do you know where you are? Do you know?" She said, "I can't really remember how I came in here." I said, "I want you to turn around and see what's behind you," because she didn't. She was focused on the plot of land that she was identifying. And when she turned around, she saw the 4-lane alignment. It was not a road yet. It was just it was sand filled, and they started to put some loom on it. And I said, "That's the 4-lane. So this is the extension that's happening now from Diamond to Land of Canaan. She paid $800,000 for that lot. It's immediately worth in the millions.
Correct.
Just by having that 4-lane pass there. So when she saw, she said, "That's the 4-lane?" So I said, "Yeah, this is where your house." So this was the far that you didn't want to, you were hesitant in coming to. And there are thousands more like her who didn't want to go to Diamond when President Ali first allocated Diamond. They said it was the backlands, it was too far. They are now in front because most people now use the Heroes Highway to get to Diamond as opposed to the previous East Bank Road, the existing East Bank alignment. So that's the front now. And those were low-income families who got those lands in the back as they called it then, because the road wasn't built yet. They couldn't see the vision. People didn't understand what his vision was and is for the housing sector. He didn't get a chance to finish this job. And that's why when we came back into government, we are ensuring that we finish the job, that the citizens of our country, that all Guyanese get to see this massive blueprint that will become a reality. And we use the expo as well to help people to do that, to help people to understand what the bigger plan is, what the vision is. Because if you go on Facebook, Travis, or you follow some of the influencers, you'll think that everything is bad and negative in our country. You know, you really have to think outside the box. You have to come out of your environment and you have to drive this country. You have to drive, you have to see for yourselves. There are people telling you that certain things are happening. People who don't even live in this country are telling you that this is bad and this is what's happening. And you are living here and boxing your mind into that and wanting to believe it. You have to break out of that and you have to go and see for yourselves. Over 30,000 people have been allocated house lots from 2020 to now, just from August 2020 to now. These are people whose lives have been changed dramatically before, from considering where they were before we came back into government and where they are today. That young woman's life is completely transformed now that she has an asset, that she can go to the bank, she can get a loan, she can build her home, and a home valued at something she didn't even think that she could. And that's because of the investment that we are making in infrastructure in these housing areas, which raises the value significantly. Because you're paying for a low-income house lot, you're paying 10% of the cost for the infrastructure that goes into that area. You're paying 10%. And you're gonna be able to realize the maximum value of it when you go to the bank. And they go and they do an appraisal for where your land is located and how accessible it is to major highways and a road network and other services. So it automatically increases your net value and you automatically have access to more financing to build a bigger home, a more comfortable home, or to build a modest home and have money left to invest in a business or something. So people have to be able to realize and recognize that this housing program is not just about delivering house lots to people. It's the endless opportunities that are created because of the housing program that we have now. Like the tens of thousands of jobs that have been created through the housing program. So there are many, many opportunities. It's just people have to understand what the vision is, and that's why it's important for us to keep talking about it, so that people not only understand, but they can see how we are integrating communities and how we are connecting communities. The people who are going to be allocated on the East Coast during the upcoming expo, they're going to have access to not one highway, but multiple highways to get to Georgetown. The Rupert Craig Highway is being upgraded. The railway embankment is being upgraded to a 4-lane. We are building the 𝐏𝐑𝐻𝐒𝐏𝐾 to 𝐿𝐻 highway, that bypass. Through the Ministry of Housing, we are extending Aubrey Barker Road from central Georgetown, that's central, all the way to Enmore. We're upgrading the 𝐏𝐻𝐒𝐿𝐻 dump site road, the Higgs-Bosch Road, going all the way to the East Coast. So you don't even have to come to Georgetown. You can bypass Georgetown completely when this road network is finished. You can drive directly from the East Coast to the East Bank without even coming to Georgetown. And this is encouraging more businesses to come into these communities as well, which makes it easier for residents to access services and also access jobs. So it's hard to capture, Travis. Sometimes I tell people, just go and drive. Just go and drive and witness for yourself the massive development that is happening in our country. This entire country is like one large construction site because there's just things happening everywhere. But there is a purpose to it. And you have to understand that it's all part of a bigger vision to develop our country, but also to ensure that the impact of that development is felt by every single Guyanese person.
I can see some faces here lighting up and also trying to tell me I'm ready to ask my question now. But just give me a few, because I have one more question before we go into the question from the audience. Is there are many housing solutions through your ministry. We could talk about the core homes that are being built, the young professional homes, from low income to middle income houses and house lots that are being provisioned. But unfortunately, there is still that situation of squatting that we have. And much of it was really inherited from the previous administration. So I know that this was a question from one of our audience members as well, because I think we thought alike on this one. But we want to know the approach, government's approach to squatting, and how these situations have been dealt with in the past or more recent times since the PPPC administration took office.
So let's take a step back before we talk about what's happening presently. If we go back to the 90s, we did a survey, and I have the report of that survey. It was the end of the 90s, early 2000. I think it was the year 2000 itself, where the Ministry of Housing, through its Community Development Department, did an assessment of all the squatter settlements in Guyana. And we found over 200 squatter settlements. And that was because of a lack of a housing policy and housing program in the 80s, during the undemocratic period. So when people don't have access to structured housing, they go and they squat. And that's what happened during the undemocratic years. And so that's what the People's Progressive Party civic government was faced with in the 90s when Dr. 𝐏𝐑�𝐶𝐑 took office in 1992. He was faced with 200 settlements, not 200 families, 200 settlements. And that was the genesis of the housing program and the recognition, and what led to the recognition that there needs to be structured housing policy. No multilateral organization wanted to lend Guyana money in the 90s to start the housing program. None, because we were a bankrupt country. In spite of that, 𝐏𝐑𝐿 started the housing program by designing housing areas and allocating house lots. That's how it started in the 90s, with no money. I don't know how we managed the economics of the country, but that's how it started. That was the genesis of it. And I said that to say to you that in the 5 years, if we fast forward now when we come to 2015 to 2020, in those 5 years, because again, the public recognized that there is no structured housing program in which they can access a house lot by going through a process of application and allocation, people resorted once again to squatting. That's what happened. That's the reality of the situation. So people just saw empty land and just went ahead and squat, because they lost all hope that there exists a system or a process by which I can apply and get through. So when we came back into government, people flocked the ministry because we came in with a very specific promise. We said to people, this is what we're going to do. And people saw from day one, we started to implement all of the things that we had included in our manifesto. So there was that renewed confidence. I started a public day when we first came back into government. Travis, the line went down Brickdam into Camp Street and then eventually wrapped around to Kroll Street. And this was during COVID. And I'm masked up and everybody's masked up. We didn't have vaccines yet. You recall all of that? We didn't have vaccines yet, and people were coming out in the thousands to meet with the ministers, to inquire about their house lot application that they had years ago, And people now applying for house lots for the first time because they actually believed that they will get a house lot, because they knew that we had a plan, a vision, a plan, and we were implementing it. That's why they came. If they didn't believe we could do it, they wouldn't come. They would go and squat. But they believed that we could do it, and they saw us making that effort, and they put themselves at risk. The Ministry of Housing received tremendous backlash for our public events and so on in 2020, in 2021, in COVID. But we recognized that people needed to ensure that they could access affordable housing. And so we had to continue with that program. We couldn't just go in our homes and lock up and say, well, it's COVID, we can't do anything about it. That would have been the easiest thing to do and the laziest thing to do. But we didn't do that. So while housing was working, health was working to ensure we procured vaccines so that we could immunize our population. Education was working to ensure we deliver online education so our kids are not deprived of an education. And all of this fits into the bigger plan of how we govern as a government. Nobody operates in silos. That's why I may talk to you today about housing, but I can tell you what's happening in the health sector. I can tell you what's happening in education. I can tell you what's happening in tourism, because we govern as a collective. And it's part of a bigger plan to ensure that all the sectors move forward together. So if people in our country desire services in one sector, they'll be able to benefit from all of the sectors, because all of the plans are integrated to move the country forward together. And so that's how, we are addressing those new squatter settlements that we found that sprung up during that 5-year period. And there is a structured process there too. We go in, we do a survey, an occupational survey. Once we have determined that the area can be regularized, we regularize it. If it's an area that is zero tolerant, we have to relocate those people. And we have a very robust relocation program. And you know how this program operates. We've been in the press for it. We've taken backlash for it, but also when people look at what we are actually doing, they recognize that a lot of what they hear is fake news. So when we have to relocate people, we help them to relocate. We give them access to lands in structured and developed housing areas. We help them to relocate. We move their structure if we have to help them move the structure, or there is a home that's built for them outside of what they currently occupy, and there is a process. People are compensated depending on if you had crops or depending on your unique circumstance. We work with people. This has been widely reported on how we have approached relocation in different areas. So it's a humane program, but it's a program that is very effective because we help people to move from squatters to homeowners. And we empower them by ensuring that they have home ownership, or they have a document that reflects that they have ownership of the land and the house that they are occupying.
Thank you for that response to that question. And we can really see that in the news, once the government is looking into the squatters, there are solutions that are crafted and given to those individuals.
I just want to commend you on the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
But my question is this morning is that why, after paying for your house lot, why the lengthy wait?
Okay, so that's a very common question, and I'm glad that you asked, because it's important for us to explain to people how, or the steps or stages in the process. So when you come and you select your house lot, you are allocated that house lot. You're given a temporary number because you're allocated from the design and temporary numbers that are created when we first do the design for the housing area. The infrastructure work has to then be completed in that area, and then subsequently you will be called for your lot identification. So you pay a down payment when you're called for your house lot. You make a down payment, and you're given some time to make other payments or to pay off for the full amount. And during that time, we are completing the infrastructure work in the housing area. then you're called for your lot identification, we call it, which is when you go and you see where your house lot is located. The surveyors take you to see that. After that, you sign your agreement of sale. That's after all the plans are recorded. And you go and you sign up for your agreement of sale. And once you sign up for your agreement of sale and you pay off, it's a very short time between then and receiving your title. The longer wait happens from when you pay to when you're taken for the lot identification. And that is as a result of the lack of investment, like I mentioned, during the 5 years when the APNU AFC was in office. Because when President Ali demitted office earlier in 2015, he was on par with allocation and infrastructure. So people were being allocated in areas where there was infrastructure existing. Because there was no new investment in housing areas during that time, you have this huge buildup of people. When we said we came in, we found 70,000 applicants who were waiting for their house lots. We can't wait to finish the infrastructure in those areas to then allocate people. People will feel like you're not doing anything. People need to know that they are allocated a house lot. And many people don't mind waiting because they know it's a sure process. They know that once they come and they select a house lot, that at the end of the day, if it takes 6 months or it takes a year, they will get to the end of the process. They'll be able to see their house lots. They know that it's secure, it's theirs. They'll be able to see it and subsequently be able to receive their title. So we are trying to catch up with the infrastructure work in all of the areas that we have created. We've started over 50 new housing areas, Travis, from 2020 to now. Over 50 new areas for which infrastructure work is going on simultaneously in all of them. So depending on the rate that we complete, that's how we are able to start the occupancy in the areas. But those people who have selected a house lot, even if they don't hear from us in a short period of time, it's secure. They have nothing to worry about. All of them will be able to physically go to their lots and subsequently sign their agreement of sale and receive a title. And people say, we're fine with that. We're okay, we trust the process because we see people getting through every day. And it takes a long time to do the infrastructure development in these areas. No matter how much money you invest in the sector, you can't make contractors go faster. If you have rain for 3 months, in 2022, we had flooding. All year 2022 was a rainy period, delayed our work significantly. In 2023, El Nino. We had the dry season, which some areas they were able to work, some they actually need water to be able to complete their work. So there's always some challenge that you have to face with, but that's life. Yeah. So we deal with those challenges. But that's the explanation for why it takes some time, because the infrastructure work is ongoing in those areas. And I always encourage people you don't have to wait for housing to call you. If you know that you were allocated in LBI, you don't have to wait for housing to call you. If you want some security and knowing that work is happening, go and visit the area and see what's going on. I do that on Sundays. I go and I drive myself and I go quietly just to see if people are working, and I actually see families doing that. I see families with their children, they're just going out and speculating. Maybe it's over there, or maybe it's over there. And they go and it's an exercise for them, and it brings some excitement for them. And some people are glad for the wait, as a matter of fact, because they said it's giving them some time to get up the rest of their money and making their plans to construct their homes once they are given that piece of land. But I do want to make the process go faster. I know it's necessary, and we are working towards that. We want to ensure that we get on par with allocation and the completion of infrastructure within a short time or at the same time. So we are working on that, but we have to clear up this massive backlog of people that we have in the system and the work that we have ongoing in existing housing areas.
Thank you for that response and clarification for Abby. I know Lorianne had a similar question that was answered by you in regard to having to pay in full, but you explained that it's just a down payment that's required, and then, you can make other payments.
Yes, so you either, some people, when they come into housing, they're so excited they pay off right away. Because it's especially if it's something like $100,000 or $150,000 and they've been saving for that moment, they're like, take all of it now. I want to pay off for this house lot because I'm gonna spend out this money. So that's okay too. You could pay it off in one installment, or you can pay the down payment and then subsequently make smaller payments as you accumulate. I encourage people to do that. If you want to come in and make a smaller payment, come in and do it. That's fine. Until you eventually pay off. And a lot of people, like I said, take advantage of that time to plan and to ensure that they access the finances to pay off. Because we have, and I asked the conveyance department recently, we have about 600 titles that have been processed that are sitting in the ministry, but that people have not fully paid off for their land as yet. The title is processed, waiting for them. But they haven't, for one reason or another, not come into us and are not making payments to pay off, because you have to pay off to receive the certificate of title. So people are faced, some people do have financial constraints that they have to face, that they are faced with. So they take some time to come in and pay off for that.
Okay. I think at this time we could take another question from Mr. Kamisi Slow. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Good day, Minister.
Good day.
It's a pleasure to have you here. My question, because I'm glad that you're on this topic right now, and it's directly to, as it relates to, commend your government, that is, to the work that they're doing on house lots. Now, while house lots are being distributed at a fast pace, there are some persons who would have received their house lots, and over a number of years, everything hasn't been done to develop the lots. Now, what is your housing ministry? We would like to know, our concern is, what are your housing ministry doing to handle this, and what measures are being put in place?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's another popular question that people ask, because especially in existing areas where people have invested their money and that have built their home, and next door to them there's an empty lot and overgrown with vegetation, and the owner for that lot is not doing anything. So some people come to us and they say, I know a vacant lot in this area, can I have that one? And I have to say to them, it doesn't work like that. That lot has an owner who was allocated maybe 10 years ago, and they've received title for it. And so we can't repossess it. There's actually a court decision that says, because CHPA was challenged once there was a challenge in the court as to whether the agency is empowered to repossess, and we lost that. So there is a court decision. So we can't repossess lands, but it is a sore for some people who live in areas that have been established 10, 15 years ago, and there are vacant lots in the area, overtaken with vegetation, swamps, because they're not, weeding or cleaning, and it poses a hazard, a security hazard, safety in terms of it also, you have a lot of mosquitoes and so on, that can affect the residents who have invested and are living there. And it's a very unfortunate situation. But we rely heavily also on the NDCs in these areas to police these areas and to encourage people to come and build on their house lots. We have recently established a unit within one of our departments strictly aimed at trying to locate these people. So we selected many of the areas that have a lot of vacant lands, and we audited the area. And all of those lots that are available, well, available meaning empty, but for which they have an owner, all of those empty lots, we went back into our system, we got the names of those that have been allocated or have title for those areas, and we issued letters. So we've been doing that over the past year, auditing these areas and sending letters, a threatening letter to try to get people to come and spend some money on their land, to develop it, and to make the other residents in the area a little more comfortable. But beyond that, there's not much more we could do, but we do recognize that it's a problem, and that's why this was one of the only things that we came up with that we could have done that's within our power to do. So we audited and we issued letters to all of those people. As a matter of fact, the fastest way to get people to come into us is to put a sign that it's the property of the Ministry of Housing, and then they come very quickly. I mean, it's their land. We can't take it back. That's one of the freedoms of our country. You know, land and title is indefeasible property, right? So it's yours. Nobody can dispossess you of it, which is a great thing. But also, people have a social responsibility. People have a social responsibility to develop your land. Some of these people have migrated, and that's why they have no interest in the land that they've received here. Some have migrated, some have passed away, and you know we're not very good at succession planning. A lot of people don't write wills and leave it to their children, and then you have kids fighting over the property, and so all kinds of reasons for why some of these lands are unoccupied, even though they have owners. But it's something that we're looking at carefully, and if we can come up with more solutions on how we can prevent that from happening in the future, we'll certainly explore those.
Welcome to my community. I'm a resident of Patterson Turkine. My question I would like to ask is, what strategy are in place to assist low-income families in accessing affordable housing?
Thank you. So that's another very valuable question. Now, I mentioned earlier that over 30,000 people have received house lots within the past 4 years. Of that, 92% are in the low income, moderate, and middle income category. So the bulk of our allocations have gone to low and moderate income people. And that's what the program was originally designed for. That's why it's affordable housing, because it was meant and designed for low income populations, and that's why the lands are so heavily subsidized by the government of Guyana. So in addition to ensuring that we deliver low-income lots to families who need it, we recognize that there are people now who can access lands but can't build a home. So that's not something that we were able to address in our manifesto, but it's something that we recognized once we came into government, wanting to help people to cross that threshold of moving now from a landowner to a homeowner. So we worked aggressively with the banks very early on in our government to reduce interest rates. Remember, I reminded you earlier, this was COVID. Interest rates were rising globally. Shipping costs, everything went up during COVID. And we lowered interest rates in Guyana. Interest rates were over 5% when we took office, and this is on housing loans. We got that reduced to 3.5% for low-income families. So you can go to any bank. It doesn't have to be one particular bank. You can go to any bank, because they're all competing against each other now because of the aggressiveness with which we are delivering house lots and building houses. So any bank now you can go to and access a low interest mortgage to build your home. And that was a significant step in helping people to access loans. Then we have banks who are no longer requiring equity. So the land that you would have bought, that you may have paid $150,000 or $200,000 or $250,000 for, they're using that as the equity. So the low-income population does not have now to pay for a land and then save up a 20% equity or 15 or 10% equity to access a mortgage. So that's another hurdle we removed from low-income families. So the land now is the equity, is taken as equity. Then we went further. We introduced the steel and cement subsidy, which is not only for people who receive land in our housing areas, whether you own a land through the government of Guyana or whether you bought it privately. We are giving the steel and cement subsidy to help you with your construction, to get you started. So even if you have a bank that says, well, the land alone cannot be taken for equity, we want you to spend some money on the land, you can access that subsidy and start your foundation. That's why we give steel and cement, to start your foundation. So once you've done that, the bank will see that you have made the investment, you fulfill the requirements, here is the rest of the money for you to construct your home. And that's one of the major ways that we are, or those are some of the major ways that we are assisting families to construct their houses. You know, we remove that from building materials. You also know we increase the threshold for the mortgage interest relief, which is benefiting thousands and thousands of Guyanese who are working, who are paying their taxes. Once you have a mortgage at the bank, you can claim all of the interest back as a deductible at the end of the year on your income tax returns. That is helping a lot of people in our country. And we have the program that you mentioned earlier, the Adequate Housing and Urban Accessibility Program, which is delivering core homes and housing subsidies to low-income populations. So the core home is valued at about $5 million that is built for you through this program, and you only pay $100,000 for it. You pay $100,000, it's worth $5 million. We build the house, and it's a loan through the IDB. The government has to pay that loan back, but all you pay as a beneficiary is $100,000. And these are the people who are, in really impoverished and who would not have been able to access a house if it was not for this program. So we have that, the core home support. We have the home improvement subsidy. For those people who have a home, whose homes are in bad shape, in desperate need of rehabilitation and renovation. So we had a period where we advertised for those people to come in. We did an assessment, and we delivered hundreds of subsidies to people. I think the subsidy is worth about $750,000. At one time it was $500,000. We raised it to $750,000 for building materials, so that they can improve their current living conditions. All of these are programs, Travis, that are ongoing, and Ms. King, on how we are assisting vulnerable people and low-income people.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for being here with us, Minister, and giving us this opportunity to ask your burning questions. So the question I have is, are there any new policies or incentives there to encourage investment from the private sector?
Yeah, that's an important question, because some people believe, a lot of people, in fact, believe that government has to do everything. That government has to make all the investment in housing, in education, in healthcare. The government has to do everything. We do most things, but the private sector can really be an engine of growth to assist in delivering affordable health care, affordable housing, affordable education. And so we give incentives in those areas as well, like removing corporate taxes on people who are providing private education and private health care. Similarly, in the housing sector, we have given, through Go Invest, concessions to companies that are constructing houses for our housing program, allowing them to import prefab materials and so on, because we're trying to bring down costs. The thing is, with the housing sector, contractors like to make a lot of money when they build a house. We don't encourage that, because we are acutely aware of the installments people have to pay at the bank to repay their loan. And so we can't encourage people to go and take on loans that are millions and millions of dollars that will straddle you with debt for years to come. So we try to keep prices low. That's why we developed our own models of houses. We have the low income model, the moderate income model, the young professional model, and we've capped the price. So many people, I've had dozens and dozens of meetings with investors who want to build these houses. Yes, we can build 1,000 homes and 2,000 homes. And when they hear the costs, they go through the door, because we can't allow them to just put whatever costs on the houses, and people can't afford it. So we have to keep the price at a manageable rate, and where there is a small profit margin, of course, they have to make a profit. But a lot of people don't want to make a small profit. They want to make big profits, and it's not feasible. The program wouldn't be feasible. That's why we have so many people who are waiting on houses as well, because a lot of people would love to have a turnkey home, but it's taking a long time for us to build houses, because we don't have that many contractors who want to work in the housing sector, because the profit margin is simply not attractive to them. But they can help, and if more private sector people are socially conscious, they can find ways and find materials that they can explore and bring into the country and help to build homes and work directly with people, rather than, you don't even have to come to the ministry. You can do this on your own. There are thousands and thousands of people who have house lots who are looking for builders. You can do this on your own. They can take this on their own as their own project, and have people come to them who have available lots and help those people to access a housing unit. We would love for that to happen. It will ease our burden tremendously. So if people can only take that initiative, if the private sector can be more aggressive in investments in housing, it would not only help the government, but more so, it will help the people who are looking to build a home but cannot pay an extravagant price for the construction of that home. And that also, they can give you their money with confidence in knowing that you'll finish the job. Because, a lot of people have encountered difficulties with contractors who have taken money from them and can't complete the work. So that's something that we have to watch and guard against very, very carefully too. But you are absolutely correct. The private sector can play a much bigger role in helping us to deliver housing on a larger scale.
How is government ensuring the integration of education and health in the new developing communities?
Thank you, Terry. Another important question. So this all starts with the housing policy. Once you have a housing policy to deliver affordable housing, you can't do that in silo. So the planners that we have at the ministry, when they are designing a housing area, before we even do anything on the ground, in the design of the area, the concept, the strategy that goes into the design of the area, it starts there. Incorporating government services, healthcare services, education, all of that happens since conceptualization, because we have to plan that into the areas. We can't build houses and then say, oh, we need a well in here, or we need electricity in here, or these people who are coming into this area will have young kids that need to send their children to school. So all that's built in from the very beginning. So in the design of these areas, we always leave space available for recreational facilities. We have land earmarked for future development for a hospital or a healthcare center, nursery school, primary school, secondary school, and other services, other government services as well, whether it be a possible post office or whatever other offices that looking at where the area is strategically located. If it's close to an area that has these services already, we may offer different services in that area when we're doing the planning and the design of that area. So every area is now minding its own business. It's part of the bigger blueprint of the country to see what is the proximity of these services. So that is planned into it. It's not an afterthought. And that's why when we do our infrastructure contracts, we include the laying of the pipe network. So GWI doesn't have to come to lay any pipes after roads are built. It's being done together when they're building out the roads. Those pipelines are being installed. So all GWI has to come to do is ensure that the water is turned on so that you can get the water through the pipe network there. And I think President Ali and the People's Progressive Party civic government saw this years ago. That's why they combined the ministry. Because some people say housing and water is a strange combination in other countries. Like water is usually under a different portfolio, maybe under utilities or something. But because we have our housing program that's designed in this way, we recognize that it's better if we take it on as part of our portfolio so that once the area is completed, people are not then waiting for water or waiting for electricity. So we also issue contracts for the installation of the transmission mains for electricity. So just like GWI, at the end of the process, GPL just have to come and put on the lights. So the lines are run with the infrastructure project at the same time. So once the area is completed, it's completed. It has drainage, it has roads, bridges, electricity, water, and subsequently those government services will come in to those areas because we have left land available at different areas or different points within a housing area for future development for schools and so on. So as people come in and occupy, we'll know what the immediate need is. The Ministry of Education does their own surveys and say, well, we have a larger amount of smaller kids, so maybe we need a nursery school first. Or they have bigger children, maybe we need a primary school or a secondary school, or we need to build a clinic. But the areas are left there. Those are planned in. So the government services are planned into those housing areas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so Minister, we're just out of time, but it would be remiss of me not to ask you, overall, it has been 4 years on since assuming the PVPC government assumed office. Lots of transformation unfolding across the country. As it relates to housing development, we have seen the Ministry of Housing and Water, through the Central Housing and Planning Authority as well, creating communities, fostering togetherness, and building out this new Guyana that President Ali always talks about. How satisfied are you with where we are now, and what is your hope for the future?
So I'm very proud of President Ali and of our government as a collective, because every sector has been working. We have implemented over 90% of our manifesto already, perhaps close to 100%. And even in my sector, even in housing, I thought, you've got to be kidding me, 50,000 house lots, how are we going to do this? And nothing is impossible. We just had to find the right team, We had to ensure that resources are available, and I have to credit the president again for this, for always supporting the housing sector. Because we can talk all day about delivering house lots. If we don't get the budget to do it, it can't be done. So people talk about, oh, so much billions are allocated to this sector and so many billions to that sector, and they question the reason for the allocation. The reason is visible for all to see, because when you go into these areas, you see people receiving house lots, you see people going and build their homes. It's those same budgets that were allocated in the parliament. That's what the money is put for. That's the use of it. So we can't talk about delivering house lots if we don't make money available for capital investment. What's the capital investment? The construction of roads, the bridges, the hospitals, the schools. And so that's what keeps us going. That's how we can deliver affordable housing. When you pay $100,000 and get a house cost worth $5 million, we have to pay for that. That's the money that has to go back to pay for that loan. So the investment is tremendous, and the results of those investments are visible for all to see. And so I'm very proud of the work in the housing sector over the last 4 years. I'm proud of the government as a collective, and I feel a renewed sense of pride in knowing that when this government goes again to the country at the next election and say vote for us, that we can do it with a straight face, and we can do it and say to you, we said to you that we will do these things, and we have done it. We don't have to go to people and make excuses. We don't have to be ashamed as ministers to go into communities and say, vote for me, I didn't do it this time, but give me another chance. Because that's what the opposition is saying to people. We didn't get it right. Give us another chance, and we'll get it right this time. It doesn't work like that. That's not how you build trust with people. You had a chance, and you blew it. You totally blew it. You didn't do the things you said you were going to do. As a matter of fact, you instilled hardship policies. That's what your government did. Took away jobs, didn't deliver housing, didn't build any new schools. You made it harder for people. You implemented taxes on water and electricity and food items. You made it difficult for people to live comfortably. And you're coming back to us and say, give us a chance? Based on what? But we don't have that difficulty, Travis. We can go back with confidence and say, we came to you in 2020 and we told you what we're going to do. And we did it. We delivered it. And so re-elect us to continue that development, to continue the progress, to show you what more we can do to make your lives more comfortable, to make the country a better place, a safer place, a happier place. So I'm very excited to go to elections. I'm very excited with the work that we have done over the last 4 years, because I know that when we go to the public again, we're going on a track record. We're going on proven, tested leadership that we can deliver for people. That's what we're going on. So we don't have anything to be afraid of, and we can talk all day. This group can sit here until nightfall, and we can talk about things that we have done, not some dream that we want to implement. We can talk here about things that have been achieved, that have been accomplished in just a short period of time. So I'm very, very pleased with the work that we have done and the work that we will continue to do in the future.
Thank you, Minister Rodrigues, and I also want to say on behalf of the people as well, thank you for your hard work and dedication, not only to you, but the entire staff over there at the Ministry of Housing and Water. So at this time, we must wrap things up on this program. Very hearty and fruitful discussion. I know a lot of insights were shared and many takeaways for all of our audience here. So we want to thank you as well for being a part of this discussion. And thank you to you, our listeners and viewers of this program, as we continue to mark the 4th year anniversary of the Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali-led government, the journey to prosperity for all. Thanks for joining us.
The Journey to Prosperity for All, celebrating the 4th anniversary of the PPPC's government.